The man who reads nothing at all is better educated than the man who reads nothing but newspapers. Now, that's a fairly provocative quote. It's sourced from Thomas Jefferson, but it's not his complete thought in the matter, and I think if we're not careful, we might not totally understand it. It's not an argument to not read. It's certainly not an argument to not be informed. I think it's better to understand that as it's a warning to be careful where you get your information. So this quote actually comes at the end of a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote. But let's look at it in its entire context. So this comes from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to John Norvell. Evidently, they're having a back and forth about newspapers, which was pretty much the main form of media in Thomas Jefferson's day. But I think a similar commentary could be applied to modern media. So not just newspapers, but also mainstream network news, radio news, cable news, as well as the print that's still around today, whether in paper and ink or whether online print. This commentary holds true to the media forms that exist today. So to your request of my opinion of the manner in which a newspaper should be conducted. So he's saying, here's his opinion of how a newspaper should be. So as much as to be useful, I should answer by restraining it to true facts and sound principles only. So in other words, what newspapers should be concerning themselves with is merely reporting true facts and staying grounded to sound principles only. He goes on to say, yet I fear such a newspaper would find few subscribers. So not only is this a commentary on how terrible the newspapers are, it's also a commentary on the readers. You know, people love to complain about bias in the media and how terrible, untrustworthy the media is. But the fact that that business model exists is a commentary on the people that consume it. You know, I live in a fairly conservative area, and a lot of people like to complain about how terrible CNN is and how terrible MSNBC is, how biased the New York Times is. And I agree with their assessment. Those are terrible media forms. I would say a lot of the so-called conservative media has a similar problem. I mean, I'll still watch Greg Gutfeld from time to time because, if nothing else, it's humorous, it's self-deprecating, it doesn't take itself too seriously. Compared to, like, Rachel Maddow or some of the former personalities that used to be on CNN, like Don Lemon or Chris Cuomo. Like, none of those people strike me as serious intellectuals. None of them strike me as serious journalists. They're more or less personalities playing a role in an anchor chair. Like, they're pretending to be serious journalists, while really they're just feeding a partisan audience commentary that they want to hear. And unfortunately, like, I haven't known Fox News to be much better in that regard. I mean, they've sold themselves out to corporate or establishment interest, at least in times in the past. There's clear examples of that. But the fact that any of these models exists are a commentary on the people that consume that type of information. They're the people that tune in night after night and allow these networks to keep the lights on and keep doing what they do. He goes on to say, it's a melancholy truth that suppression of the press could not more completely deprive the nation of its benefits than is done by its abandoned prostitution to falsehood. Now keep in mind that Jefferson was a huge advocate of freedom of speech and freedom of press. He was one of the people who insisted on a Bill of Rights be included in the Constitution and insisted on things like the First Amendment, which protects the right of people to engage in the activity of press. You know, the First Amendment protects your right to start a newspaper or be a journalist of some type. But in this letter, he seems to be lamenting the fact that it's hard to tell which is worse, the state suppressing the press, merely having state channels of media, or journalists gone bad, essentially. Journalists that are merely chasing the ratings, merely playing to an audience, that have abandoned the principles of journalism and instead have just prostituted themselves out to reporting falsehood because it helps pay the bills. So he goes on to say, nothing now can be believed which is seen in newspapers. Truth itself becomes suspicious by being put into that polluted vehicle. So these papers are so bad, the media is so bad, that even when they do happen to report the truth, you still have to diligently question it. It's like that saying a broken clock is right twice a day. Well, even when it's right, you still have to question it because for the other 23 hours and 58 minutes of the day, that clock is dead wrong. So even when it just happens to tell the right time, you still have to be like, wait, can I really trust this clock? The real extent of the state of misinformation is known only to those who are in situations to confront facts within their knowledge with the lies of the day. So to try to put this another way, what he's saying is the people who really know how terrible the media is are those who maybe have some expertise in a field, or maybe they have firsthand or close knowledge of a situation, and then they look and see how the press is reporting on it, and they know, at least in that particular situation, that the press is full of shit. They know that they're misrepresenting the story, that they're omitting crucial information to try to color a story a certain way or to make it more sensational by leaving out, the mitigating facts that would make the story seem, more reasonable or more mundane. For example, look at how the media reported the death of George Floyd in police custody. Now, if you only go by CNN's coverage of the event, you'll get a totally different picture of the event than if you actually just go to the source material and say, watch the body cam footage for yourself. Now, if you just go to the true facts and try to understand it by filtering it through sound principles, you sort of understand how this happened. And even if you don't agree with everything the officers did, particularly Derek Chauvin, you still understand how the officers reacted to the situation. And it's not altogether unreasonable. I actually made a video on just that topic where I actually go through the body cam footage and try to give the full context of what was going on in that situation. But that's not going to sell newspapers, right? People want to read a sensational headline, and they want good guys and bad guys, and they want everything to be plotted out in such a way that confirms their biases. But I digress. Reading further, I really look with commiseration over the great body of my fellow citizens who, reading newspapers, live and die in belief that they have known something of what has been passing in the world in their time, whereas the accounts they have read in newspapers are just as true a history of any other period of the world as of the present, except that the real names of the day are affixed to their fables. I think that's kind of a clumsy wording, but basically he's saying, he's lamenting the fact that people go their whole lives believing that what they're reading in the newspapers is gospel truth or near to it, when in reality it's far, far from that. He goes on to say, general facts may be indeed collected from them, such as that Europe is now at war, that Bonaparte has been a successful warrior, that he has subjected a great portion of Europe to his will, so on and so forth. But no details can be relied on. So he's saying, yeah, you can get general information from media. I always like to say, you can trust the weather. If they tell you it's raining outside and you can look out your window and see that it's raining, well, then you can trust that. If they tell you it's 57 degrees outside and you can look at your thermometer and, oh, look, it's right around 57 degrees outside, well, you can trust that. So a lot of times general facts are trustworthy, but no details can be relied on. So you should never assume that even though they might get the general facts right, you should never assume that they're giving you all the details. You should never assume that they're not omitting all sorts of things that would put the story in a different light. He goes on, I will add that the man who never looks into a newspaper is better informed than he who reads them, and so much as he knows nothing, is nearer the truth than whose mind is filled with falsehood and error. So the guy that doesn't watch the news at all is better informed than the guy who does, and that's all he reads, and his head is full of falsehoods and misinformation and bits and pieces, but not the whole story. Last sentence here, he who reads nothing will still learn the great facts, and the details are all false. So he's saying, yeah, the guy that doesn't even read the newspaper, he's still gonna figure out that Europe is at war. But as they say, in war, the first casualty is the truth. By not reading the newspapers, he's not going to be subjected to all the war propaganda. He's not going to be subjected to all the various interest groups trying to sell their framing of the conflict. I think that's what he means when he says the details. While looking up this Jefferson quote, I also came across this other quote attributed to Jefferson that reads, I do not take a single newspaper, nor read one a month. Feel myself infinitely the happier for it. One of the reasons I love reading Thomas Jefferson is because a lot of times I'll read something that he wrote, and I'll think to myself, yeah, I've thought that exact same thing. Maybe I'd word it a little bit different, but I've often thought that not only does the corporate media not inform its audience and actively misinforms them, they also steal their joy and just put them in a terrible state. They get people constantly worked up about nothings. I often refer to the headlines of the day as sort of the controversy du jour. Instead of the soup of the day, the media is serving up some contrived nonsense that they're trying to make a story out of. And they just sort of string their audience along with a never-ending meal of clickbait and hype and sensationalism. This really does affect people's mental health, but fortunately, they also try to sell you the cure. So they get you all anxious and worked up and probably depressed. But don't worry, because during the advertisements, the drug companies that are a lot of times the chief sponsors of these media companies, the drug companies will try to sell you the cure. They'll sell you the latest drugs they've developed to help people deal with anxiety and depression, irritable bowel syndrome. Well, perhaps if you didn't spend several hours a day sitting on your butt consuming garbage media, I don't know, went for a walk or had a conversation with someone intelligent, perhaps if you did those things and consumed less garbage media, you wouldn't be as anxious or depressed, and your bowels wouldn't be all tied up in knots all the time. Perhaps there's benefits also in fasting from a diet of this stuff. Just as not going to McDonald's for 2 or 3 meals a day would probably benefit you greatly, not going to the media 2 or 3 times a day to get all worked up and bent out of shape about whatever nothing they're reporting on today might also benefit your health, both mental and probably physical. Now, to wrap this up, I want to give an example of what I'm talking about, but I feel as though I should put trigger warnings in this before I do, because I fear just talking about the nonsense the media talks about might actually inflict on people undue anxiety and stress. But I like to think I'm doing this for science. I'm trying to show my point. So there's a pattern in media that I see over and over again. And keep in mind, this is from somebody who's standing fairly far back. I don't consume mainstream media at all on a regular basis. But because I live in the world, I sort of pick up on what they're talking about. And this pattern emerges where like the left will say something, the left-wing media. So clearly there's biases in the media, but the left side will put out something that to put out a story that's just patently ridiculous in how they cover it and how they frame something. I think of them kind of like rabble-rousers in the midst of an agitated crowd. They're like provocateurs. They'll stand up and shout something that is ridiculous, but they know that it's going to feed into this crowd's emotions and get them all stirred up. So they shout it anyway, and don't you know it? People get all a buzz and they get all worked up, and this solicits a response from the other side. You know, when CNN says something ridiculous, well then Fox seems to gleefully say within themselves, "Oh, now we got something to talk about. We can talk about how ridiculous this thing is that the left just said, and we can give our audience the rest of the context or more of the context." And I guess in a way that's good because it's giving some balance, but to me the whole thing just seems like a monumental waste of time. So, you know, Trump might say something that the left takes wildly out of context, and the right feels compelled to set the record straight. So you waste all this time trying to refute a lie or a mischaracterization of something. And I guess in a way it is good to try to set the record straight and try to give people a fuller context of something. But at the same time, while we're doing all this, we're not having a real conversation. We're just bickering over the controversy du jour, as I like to call it. So for a current example, Elon Musk gives this speech just prior to Donald Trump's inauguration. And at some point in the speech, he raises his hand, and the clowns in the corporate media look at this and say, "Look, Hitler used to raise his hand out like that. Therefore, Elon Musk must be like Hitler." Now that analysis is patently dumb on so many levels. Like, for example, Elon Musk is a big advocate of free speech. That's why I went back to Twitter, currently called X, is because Elon took it over, and Elon is a big free speech guy. See, I don't love X because I think everything on it is true. I love X because everyone can speak their mind, and I can sort out what I think is true. And that's not what Hitler was about. That's the exact opposite of what totalitarian regimes are like. They want to suppress speech, as where Elon Musk is he's the opposite of that. He loves free speech. He champions it. In his mind, you overcome bad ideas with better ideas. You overcome bad speech or incorrect speech with telling the truth. But no one entity or one person can be the arbiter of what is true. So we need a space where you can be free to speak your mind, where everybody can express their thoughts, and the rest of us can listen and read and sort through it and make up our own minds. That's the power of free speech as opposed to censorship, and that's why free speech is to be preferred. So in many ways, Elon Musk is the exact opposite of what a Hitler or a Nazi would be. And to illustrate their hypocrisy, whoever made this meme, they have CNN here with a microscope staring intently on Elon Musk trying to make something out of nothing. CNN's now blind. He has his blind person glasses on. He's got his feeler stick because he can't see. And there's all these examples in front of him of prominent Democrats doing the same thing with their hand, and he's not comparing them to Hitler or calling them Nazis or anything. And here's a post actually directly from Elon Musk commenting on this. "The legacy media is pure propaganda. You are the media now." He's actually talking to thinking people like me. I'm not perfect, and I'm probably wrong about some things. But, if you come watch my channel, at least I'm trying to tell you the truth. At least I'm trying to give you, the viewer, the same perspective that I have. You might find fault in it, but I'm coming from a genuine place and offering up my perspective on things. So in a way, he's talking to me. I am the media now. But unlike much of the corporate press, I'm trying to be something more than just clickbait and hype. I'm trying to put stuff out there that someone will view and say, wow, that's an interesting perspective. I haven't thought of it that way. But I digress. And he's retweeting this post from Libs of TikTok. Can someone direct me to the articles where the media expressed outrage over this? So it shows Hillary Clinton with her hand out, similar fashion to Hitler used to. Did they accuse Hillary of being Hitler? Obama does the same thing. Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris. Are all these people Nazis? Well, if you're going to apply your standards equally, and you called Elon Musk a Nazi because he put his hand out like this, well, then you'd have to do the same thing for these people if you were going to be consistent. But consistency is not a vice of the mainstream media, is it? Here's another meme. So you have Elon Musk here, and then you have this blue-haired woke person getting all bent out of shape. Look, he's doing the Nazi salute. And then he's pointing at him, and then he's slowly getting self-awareness, and he's realizing that he just did the same exact thing. So he's questioning him in himself. Am I a Nazi? Well, maybe he's not thinking that, but people on that side generally don't have a lot of self-awareness. At least that's how they appear to me. Maybe they are really calculating and they know they're full of shit and they're just, trying to make something out of nothing. But this whole episode was a total waste of time. Because the media was trying to get some clickbait, they were trying to get a catchy headline, they made this big stink out of Elon Musk and his alleged Nazi salute. This solicited a response from more sensible people to say, no, that's ridiculous, you're being ridiculous. And while we're all having this conversation, we're not having a real conversation. We're not really talking about the issues of the day in any depth. We're just being baited with nonsense. And then those of us who are more sensible find ourselves being consumed with constantly replying and trying to debunk the pure nonsense that the other side is pumping out. There's a saying that a lie goes around the world before the truth has a chance to put its boots on. So you have to learn to be wise with what you bother interacting with. To draw on a personal anecdote, on a fairly regular basis, a lot of the inspiration for my content is replying to things that people leave in my comment section. And I actually invite critiques and honest disagreements because often they're a catalyst to further conversation. And that's how you learn things, how you learn from other points of view. Even if you don't entirely agree with them, often you can still learn from them if the disagreement's coming from an honest place and is reasonable. But other times, people will just leave comments that there's little to any substance of them, and it's clear from their tone and the like that they're not even being honest. They're just like on a mission to attack your point of view. They never concede anything. Like if you make a good point, they just gloss over it and go on to the next thing. When I was younger, I would spend more time trying to interact with these people because I thought deep down maybe there's a reasonable person in there, and if I can just tap into that somehow, I can have a fruitful conversation with this person. But as I gotten older, I've learned that some people are just like a bottomless pit of deceit. It's like trying to argue with the devil. It doesn't matter how much truth you give him or how much you point out his lies. He's just going to find another lie to throw at you. He's never going to concede anything. He's never going to repent of his ways. He's just going to try to find some other vector of attack. Try to find some other way to attack the truth. And that's how I feel about a lot of corporate media. A lot of these so-called mainstream platforms have so discredited themselves that they're no longer worthy of my consideration. It's no longer worth my time to engage with them anymore. I mean, the only reason I make videos like this is because they still have a viewership, and I'm hoping that this video will find some of them, and it'll get those people to question whether or not they should continue to watch CNN or read the New York Times or continue to consume this type of media. Anyway, those are my thoughts, and that's why I think there's wisdom in this saying: the man who reads nothing at all is better educated than the man who reads nothing but newspapers. Now, this first man, at least his head isn't filled with complete nonsense. At least he's not constantly being agitated by these contrived controversies that are just there to try to grab your attention and get you to click on the thing so they can profit from your eyeballs seeing whatever ads that are going to pop up once you click on that article or click on that video. Or if you're sitting down in front of your television watching cable news, they can make money off of your attention. The man who just ignores all that is better off and probably closer to the truth.